Hey, welcome everybody to another GRIP-Birkman Coaches Cafe as we're talking about the elusive dotted diamond. And we're going to have just a small group today that's here as we're having this discussion, talking about it from perspectives of some very seasoned coaches and some brand new coaches, and what are some of the challenges that we get into. We will almost certainly have another conversation very soon, if not next month, very soon have another conversation continuing this dialogue about how we can help people connect their GRIP report and their Birkman report. And the way that happens is the dotted diamond. That is the connecting point between the two assessments. That is where we finally come and help people get a good handle on their behavior in such a way that you cannot understand unless you're looking at both their personality, their natural self, and their giftedness, their supernatural gifts that the Spirit is, how the Spirit is working through them to carry them to behaviors that cannot be explained any other way except by the fact that it is their gifts at work in them. So let's dive right into things. In fact, I want to share a screen with you real quick to just talk a little bit about a scenario here where we might be able to just kind of have this as a launch pad. I like to use Miro when I am doing this online. And since we're having to do a whole lot of coaching still online these days, and in fact, most of my one-on-one coaching is done by Zoom. And so I'm able to flash this up for people, and it doesn't require them to get on. I use Miro just because I already have everything set up in there, but I'm sharing the screen with them just as I'm sharing it with you right now. And as we're talking about the dotted diamond, they don't have to move the symbol. I move it for them because we're talking about this to an individual, not the team. And as they are describing their gifts, we're able to move them around. So what I'd like to do is use the illustration. I'm going to talk to you about an illustration. Well, let me just do a general thing here, first of all. Let's say we've got someone whose diamond is solidly in the red. Help me out, guys, on the call with me. If this diamond is solidly in the red, what does that mean?
Dark red. Well, so, you're a doer. You're
doer.
Perceived by others as a doer. A do-it.
That's right. You are a doer if you're up in the red. If you're over in the green, what's that one?
Talker.
That's the talker. And down, excuse me, didn't mean to move the whole thing there. Down in, hello, click on it twice and you can move it. Click twice. There you go. All right, this is a real live demonstration. So if we're solidly down in the blue, then what?
Thinker.
And over to the yellow.
Planner.
Yeah, that's the planner, administrative analyzer, right. So wherever they might be, and we know also that sometimes they might be close to the line. We might have someone who's in the red very close to the green. That might mean that this is a red person, you know, they've got a red way of wanting to get things done. But what does it mean when they get some of that greenness in there with them?
Probably they're much more open to talking about things, making sure that things are verbalized before they act or as part of their action. Yeah,
you know, they might want to talk through some things as they're drawing people in. They might even want to be talkative. You know, the red is very friendly anyway, and the green is very much also in the extroverted thing. So they might be talking to people, bringing them on board to help them get the task done, that sort of thing. And then the if this diamond moves over to, let's say, the green, it's more green than the red. It'll have some similarities to that, except they're doing a lot more talking and not necessarily getting to action as much. But maybe with the green, this talking person is wanting to talk through things in a practical way so that they can get things done, you know, actually start moving to action. Same thing, green might be close to the blue. We said this was the analytical, you know, thoughtful one. So they're talking with people as they're also trying to maybe get some new ideas going. And here it might be the idea that's taking precedent, but they do want to talk to people about it. What about the blue that might be close to the yellow?
thinking about systems?
Yeah. Yeah, right. I think so. They're thinking up this thing that's going to be more systematic, more administrative. How are we going to carry this out? Make sure it gets. I've got some ideas, but I've also got ideas about how these ideas need to be put to work, and so want them to be done correctly. And then finally, the yellow can be close to the blue, just the opposite side of that, but it's the same, except that they're saying, hey, it's the plan that takes precedent. So before I put this plan in place, I might, want to think through it with somebody carefully. Or the yellow close to the red, I want to be sure things are done right. And I also do want to make sure that they are done. I do want to be sure that the plan gets put to action and it gets done in the right way. So when they're close to the lines, we've got those variations that can come. And of course, if the diamond is close to the center, we know that they can draw from all four quadrants. So just that little orientation there. When we're talking about the dotted diamond, we're only concerned with the placement of the diamond. We don't need to worry about the other symbols right now. We're just talking about their usual effective style of behavior. So let me just kind of take an example of Bob. Bob will be our volunteer because Bob leads a team of volunteer counselors in his church's ministry. As their ministry, they have a community ministry that reaches out, and he's one of those. He's not just a volunteer counselor, he leads a team of volunteer counselors. So he has some administrative responsibilities there. But Bob's diamond is very solidly down in the blue here. So he, wants to spend considerable time thinking through all the possibilities as he plans for the future, and very, very thoughtful in his approach of how he's going to be doing things. But let's bring over his gifts here, and I'll use the illustration of the fans that we rely on heavily to help us as we try to place a dotted diamond. In Bob's counseling sessions, sometimes he feels that his gifts are the only way that he can explain the way that he's working with people, because his gifts are, and here are his top spiritual gifts: exhortation, mercy, way down here in a supporting gift, helps, also a supporting gift. So he also has administration. Well, that's also a supporting gift. And so exhortation, mercy, administration, helps. All of these are pulling in different directions. And what I would do with Bob is say, let's look only, don't let the rest of these fans confuse you. Let's look only at the fans that pertain to your gifts. And so we said, he has a gift of exhortation. What directions might that pull? Well, from where his diamond is, it could pull him way up in this direction toward the red. Exhortation could also pull farther up toward the green. At any rate, the exhortation gift is definitely pulling upward. We see this fan that's definitely going in an upward toward being more extroverted than where the diamond might ordinarily be with his usual behavior. And so that's exhortation. We can think about mercy. Well, which way is mercy? Mercy might pull him back down farther into this blue. It might look very much like his usual style of behavior. Administration, on the other hand, that might tend to pull him over somewhat toward the yellow in that general direction. If we were thinking of the diamond being, say, in the center, where does it pull from the center? Well, it pulls down in the direction of yellow. And if we thought about, well, what about his gift of helps? That pulls over back toward the green. So he's got mercy and he's got helps, both pulling back toward the green. And he's got some administration pulling over in this direction, and he's got exhortation that's pulling out that direction. So in talking to Bob about how do his gifts come to play as he's doing his personal one-on-one counseling with people, and as he's leading this team, as Bob started describing his behavior, he was talking about how he feels drawn to help people draw up a plan that will be very practical, that will focus on their spiritual growth. And so as he's talking about that, well, the spiritual growth part seems to be pulling up in this direction toward the green, even toward the red, as he's wanting them to go into action, and he's wanting them to, he's talking through with them what their plan might be. That seems to be pulling very much up in this direction, doesn't it? And he also says he finds great joy in supporting and organizing the schedules of other volunteer counselors. Now, this was surprising in his coaching session, because with this being very blue, you wouldn't think that he would be much of wanting to get into the administrative things of keeping calendars and scheduling, especially scheduling for other people. But guess what? He said, no, he does find great joy in that. And his Birkman alone wouldn't explain that. But as we started talking about this gift of administration and how strong that is, well, Bob starts working with where is his diamond moving. And in fact, let's just leave his diamond right there where it is ordinarily, and let's bring his dotted diamond down. He talks about, well, does it move him up this way? Does it move him that way? Does it move him this way? And he's seeing how the truth of the matter is it could be moving him all around there. Ultimately, as we talked about Bob in this particular context of this volunteer counseling ministry, he said he really felt like it's landing there in the yellow, but it's really up really close to the center, because he finds himself at times drawing from all of the quadrants. And boom, as he started seeing that his diamond's landing right there, he said, now let me tell you how this really does explain some of the things that I'm involved in. And he started really opening up to how his gifts pull him farther away from this comfort zone of his diamond to behave in ways that could never be explained. And he gets great joy out of what he's doing because it is exercising his gifts. So it was surprising that it came up here. It could have come up any of these places because it was so close to the center as he started talking about it. He even said, at times it does seem like my diamond's more over here in the green. And at times it does seem like it's more over in the yellow. So talk to me, guys, about what this, using this illustration, even talking about Bob, what are some other insights that you might have seen for him as a coach as you talk through this? I'll leave the illustration up in the share screen for a little while as we talk.
I think it's interesting that, as I've been looking at that and talking to people, a lot of it depends on if they've been able to experience, if they kind of have a conscious understanding of what it means to be able to act in their spiritual gifts. Some people kind of don't have a sense of what it, maybe they haven't had the opportunity to operate in their spiritual gifts. So they get more confused about this time talking about what the dotted diamond might be, because they're not really sure. Maybe they've been prevented from operating in their spiritual gifts very often. And so it's much more confusing. But
yeah.
The folks that I've talked to that really do have a firm grasp on their spiritual gifts, they can clearly show where it's moved to, and that those are the folks that really value their ability to work in those spiritual gifts, and they have a lot of stories about how that impact happens. But I'm really interested that so there's probably some. I'm kind of going off topic a little bit, or your question, the question that you asked, but the variation between the diamond and the dotted diamond, there must be some kind of some fluctuation between those two as people are faithful to act in their spiritual gifts, or unfaithful and subverting the spiritual gifts to doing to working in the flesh, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you want to talk to us a little bit more about that, subverting their gifts by acting in the flesh?
Well, I mean, like in this example with Bob, I mean, he might he might not, you know, I guess might be just working out of it. We even within the Birkman, we have all these the dangers of acting, you know, when you're talking about, sorry, the GRIP.
Yeah, with the GRIP, where you're talking about the liabilities.
Yeah, the liabilities. We'll talk about,
it.
you know, well, this is what it'll look like if you're operating in the flesh. And sometimes that's an easier way to tell which are your spiritual gifts, the accuracies of your spiritual gifts, because, you know, those are telltale signs.
Right.
And so that would be an example here, right? Of, okay, maybe that's part of that reversion of I'll be operating in my regular diamond unless I'm actually participating in listening to God and hearing from him and responding, rather than just kind of falling into a normal pattern and kind of taking them for granted and behaving as if I'm operating in the spiritual gift when I'm not really.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, you know, another thing that I think about is, well, as you mentioned, Nate, when someone is still uncertain about their gifts, they're new in their faith, perhaps, or new even to the concept of looking at a gift combination and talking gift language. What I like to do with them is say, let's talk about a specific time, a specific situation, and a specific time where, you know, now knowing what you know about your personality from the Birkman, you say, yeah, I'm solidly with this. I know this is who I am in my natural personality. Now we're going to talk about a situation where you say, but I was involved in this situation, and I know that I was acting outside of that comfort zone, and I was doing so in a very powerful way that I cannot explain by my behavior alone. So setting the scenario for them that way. In fact, with Bob, this is what I did with only a little bit of variation. This is a real person that I coached fairly recently. Uh-huh. And in his case, though he is, though he's been a believer for quite a while, he has not really been confronted with his spiritual gifts. He hasn't had opportunity to do that. So we were really zeroing in on what are his gifts. And he was saying, well, this is how it came out on my assessment. And yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with that, but what does that mean? And so to get to that what does that mean conversation, we just kind of walked through a scenario where he started talking about how he works with those people in that volunteer ministry, and came up with a couple of specific illustrations. And in that specific illustration, that's why his diamond lands over here on that area, because he's describing the scenario for me, and I'm moving the diamond around and say, yeah, that sounds like green behavior. Oh yeah, that sounds like red behavior. That sounds like yellow behavior. Yellow, yellow, yellow. And he kept coming up with more of the yellow thing. And even the joy, when he really started emphasizing on that, I really get joy out of helping my other counselors with these, with their scheduling and calling them, contacting them, keeping up on the spreadsheets. Talked about all the spreadsheets he kept. That's why it made it, you know, I landed it in the yellow and said, well, see if this seems to be what you're describing to me. And he says, well, yeah, that's it. That's it. So, that's why I like to manipulate the dotted diamond for them as they are describing a scenario for me. And we see it moving around over there until, for this particular situation, it lands there. Now, when he's acting in another situation, it might land someplace else. It might land more over in the green, perhaps, because he's just saying, you know, I listen to somebody talk for a while, and then I say, listen, let me just share this back to you. And he says, there are times when I'm doing most of the talking. Okay, that sounds really green, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So again, it's situational. Does that help a little bit, Nate?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's really fun because I think in a lot of these settings, people want something that's more definitive. They want something that they don't have to think about. They don't have to keep negotiating. They want it to be solid. And it's not always that way. If one gift is that they're operating in is more of a supporting gift, it might be situationally dragging them further down, below their regular diamond. But then when they're operating in a different gift, they don't always happen simultaneously, right?
Right.
And so that's part of how it needs to be kind of brought up. But I really like it's really been helpful for people that I've talked to see, wow, okay, so I can actually tell when I'm operating in spirit, and that encourages them. Oh, look, that's out of my normal zone, and it can only be explained supernaturally by this additional thing that God's doing in my life, right? And that gives people encouragement. I've been finding that it's especially impacting when I call that out and I say, wow, isn't it awesome that God is using you in that way? And it's so recognizable. And it must be wonderful for you to see that God's working in your life and he's giving you that gift to do that. And you see people just start to glow when you call them out you call that out for them.
Yeah. And at the same time, you can't isolate one gift. They are always, you've got this combination that's always at work in you. In fact, Ken DeMar, I'm gonna put you on the spot here because this gifting thing can get messy. As Paul Ford likes to talk about the mushing of our gift combination as they come together, and that mushing thing is kind of, it doesn't have a definite form, and it's not quantifiable. And so, Ken, what are some of the tips or tricks that you might have to share about helping people, particularly people that really would like for this to be quantifiable, and we just can't do that?
Well, I work with pastors a lot and church leaders, and people who are up front a lot have some real aha moments when we talk about this, because often they don't understand that often people only see them in the middle of their gift. So, if you're a teacher and you say, I'm not a real comfortable teacher, but boy, God seems to really give me the ability to teach in such a way. And then they run into that same person outside of that class, and that person seems to continue to see them as a teacher. And they're saying, I'm not sure how to respond, and to give them the language that says, no, God empowers you outside of your usual to be a teacher in that moment, but you go back to your normal, you go back to your original. And to understand that our dotted diamond always goes back to who we really are, when the Holy Spirit is not needing us to be empowered to do that particular activity right then. So that there's this openness, there's this language that you suddenly have that says, okay, now I understand why people often treat me different than I expect, or why people expect something different of me than I'm able to produce in the moment. I'm not able to be that teacher. When I see them in the aisle of the grocery store and they ask me this theological question, and I'm like, what? Well, because they see me from a very, very unique perspective, where my usual is in a very different place because of the working and power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So that, part of that is just helping people understand, to give them language. One of the things Birkman and GRIP do it so well is they give us language that helps understand what's going on in our lives very, very, often. And that's a gift. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but that's where my mind was going.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's where my mind was going as we were talking.
and Ken, on that same subject, you mentioned, coaching so many pastors and how different people see them. I don't know about you, but a couple of times, well, I've seen this go two very opposite directions. So many times there is a pastor who feels like he has to have all the gifts. And while, yes, there are times when perhaps he does need to exercise some of these other qualities, he may not have a gift of a word of wisdom, but he needs to offer words of wisdom to people as he is pastoring them, counseling them, whatever. And he may not necessarily have a gift of giving, but there are times when he's in a situation where he says, I find myself joyfully wanting to give to this person because the Spirit has just led me to do that. So how do you deal with that pastor who puts maybe, almost 25 on every gift because he feels like he's got to have all of them? How do you help those guys come to realize that there might really be another way to look at this?
I've had not a lot, but I've had the odd time where you go through the dotted diamond, and the person I'm dealing with will go, because especially key leaders, pastors, and people who feel like they've got to perform in the context of the body of Christ regularly. That sounds terrible, but anyway, they often will see themselves as needing to be gifted in all the areas. Then once you have the dotted diamond discussion, and they begin to realize, oh, hold it. No, there's times when God needs me in this, but not always. And I've had several cases where you actually have people go back and say, can I rearrange my numbers? Can I go back and look at my grip again? Because I really don't. Yes. When I wrote it, I was thinking, oh, in that moment, yes, that gift was prevalent. Mm-hmm. But I don't really see it that often. So I wouldn't rank it as high. I would answer some of those questions a little differently. And suddenly you get a much more realistic view of the way that God tends to most effectively give you, power, fruit, joy in those gifts, rather than just God needs you to work in this moment. And so he empowers you for this, and God's able to do that. But that's not what tends to give me power, fruit, and joy. And so then when you go back and relook at it again, it changes the way they think about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that trio of words, because that power, fruit, and joy are really a litmus test for us sometimes. If this is really a gift that you've been given that really is an ongoing gift. Like you, I think I've seen some times where in the body of Christ, for some reason, God has said, this is needed at this moment, tag, you're it, for this particular gift, for this particular moment, and this particular need in the body. But it's not necessarily an ongoing gift that he gives. Sometimes there are these gifts of manifestation, or these maybe temporal gifts. Don't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a person might, we once we get talking to people and teams, there's somebody who will say, yeah, I can only remember once or twice in my life when God used that gift, but it shocked the daylights out of me. And it was sure not representative of who I am, but it didn't necessarily, it met the need, but it wasn't one of those ongoing things that bring me, fruit, joy, and this and power.
Yeah.
Seems like with pastors, they're used to having, whether or not they feel like they have all of the spiritual gifts, they've been required to operate in them. And so I think pastors are used to behaving, or used to somehow practicing all of the spiritual gifts. And so it becomes more difficult for them until they start talking about the dotted diamond, like you were saying, Ken, then they could start to, oh, all right, let's not super spiritualize this. Let's get down to really the normal, more, ongoing. What are the ones I'm doing normally, or maybe outside of my pastoral role or something like that. But then there's the other side. So that in that case, it's harder to pull the dotted diamond out of people when they have an overdeveloped sense of all of the spiritual gifts. But on the other hand, when I was doing the GRIP-Birkman with my 17-year-old daughter, in her case, it was the opposite problem of, she hasn't really had an opportunity to operate in her spiritual gifts. And so it's harder for her to identify which ones she had. So she scored very low in all of them. And that was a different problem of trying to discover which spiritual gifts and where that dotted diamond would go for her.
Yeah, when she doesn't have a track record yet and hasn't been able to get involved in ministries. I'm working with one church that wants all of their new members to do the GRIP very soon after they have come to faith, been baptized, joined the church. Now we're going to try and help them find their place in ministry. So they want them to take the GRIP to do that. And I was very reluctant in the beginning because I say, how can they know what their gifts are? They have no context yet for that. But they said, what we finally came down to was, hey, let's do this as an orientation to them with their gifts. And as they're starting to get involved with ministries, and we brought in ministry leaders to talk about the different needs in their ministry. And as they would be talking about these needs, we'd be looking around to see the expression on people's faces. Let's say our community ministry comes in and they're talking about a need for tutors for lower income kids that are coming to our tutoring program. And we see somebody's eyes start lighting up with, oh yeah, I would like to do that. Well, great. Let's get you over with that as a starter, get you into that ministry where you feel like you would like to do that. And let's see how that goes and where that might lead later on. And as they start to discover other ministries that they might want to be involved in, let's have you come back, later on, maybe a couple of years from now, and do the GRIP again. See where you are there as you're a little bit more mature, know yourself a little better, have had more opportunity. And as people have seen you in ministry, now they can come and they can do the, here's what I think of you for you. And we can help guide you more to get an even better understanding of your gifts. I don't mind doing that. I definitely do not encourage people to do the Birkman over again, unless they've done it as a very young person, and let's wait a few years to come back and do that. Or there are other situations where their personality really has changed. But for the GRIP, it's a little bit different story. And the context does make a difference for them. And as we think back to that other thing of, that pastor who's thinking about, if he's, this opposite end of the spectrum, the pastor who thinks he's got to have all of the gifts. In my case, I see that mostly with single staff pastors who he's the only professional staff person in the church. And so he thinks he has to do it all. And, with that pastor, I want to try and help him to see that, hey, whenever you do this, who are you keeping from doing something that God might have called them to do because you're doing it when they ought to be doing it? And they'll say, but it's so hard to get people motivated. It's just easier to do it myself. Yeah, well, we're not talking about easy. We're talking about the purpose for the gifts from Ephesians 4, 11 to 17, that the reason you have been put there, brother, pastor, teacher, is for what? And, if we need to, we'll open it up and you read it to me. You're there for the equipping of the saints. You are there to build up the body for the ministry. So who is supposed to be doing the ministry, you or the body? And, it's like, I more than once I've had somebody say, man, you just shot me right between the eyes. Well, let's talk about what do you need to do to build up the body so that those people will be taking their responsibility, because we're in this as one whole body, not one person trying to be all the body parts at once.
And if we go back to the power fruit joy,
Yeah.
and so then you talk to that same person and you say, so what are you doing that doesn't give you joy, that has very little power, that that doesn't produce fruit? Then you begin to say, so why are we doing it? One of my favorite sayings is that sacred cows make the very best hamburger. So sometimes you simply have to say, you know what, if I'm not gifted to do this, maybe I shouldn't be doing it. And maybe we have to let it go. And if God brings someone up to do that, he's going to gift someone in a special way. And that's, and if not, maybe that whatever program that's been going on can probably safely die. And that's really hard, but it begins to produce fruit in a whole new way, because suddenly you're doing the things that where you do have power and fruit and joy, and you're empowering other people to do things that God gifts them with power, fruit, and joy. And that begins to help the church thrive.
Yeah, Ken, I'll give you a perfect example of that. I was in seminary with more than one fellow student, colleague, who said, I feel called to preach, and in order to have a place to preach, I will pastor. They did not have the gift of pastoring. They had no great desire really to have to do the things that pastors are supposed to do. You know, that idea of holding people's hands, visiting them in the hospital, leading them along, shepherding them. I will do that because I have to, so I will have a pulpit to preach from. Where they really had a gift of, maybe prophecy, teaching, maybe even leadership. But the pastoring part was not for them. And because of the preconceived ideas of who can preach in our pulpits, it has to be the pastor. They had to take on the role of pastoring. And man, how I would have loved to have helped those guys to say, there might be another way for you to do this. Let's talk about, could there be another model perhaps that you could pursue? Or if you're going to have to be in name the senior pastor, could you have someone else doing the pastoral ministry beside you? Is there a way that you could help the church to understand, if you guys want me, this is where my giftedness is, and I will need to have someone else helping me to do these other ministries that I am not gifted for? Wouldn't that be revolutionary?
Yeah, once we get that, if we can understand that, and it sounds, when you're talking about it, you're saying, well, that sounds fairly easy, but it's not. It's hard for us to not get caught in our preconceived notion, like you're talking about. Well, I've got to take on the role of pastor because it's going to give me the platform to do what I want. Well, no, there's probably some better options.
Hey, and if we're in a team build and this team of leaders together with this pastor start looking at this and saying, okay, now we see where your real giftedness is and what do we need to do to fill in the other gaps. I can envision how a team building situation with a leadership team, even if it's the pastor with the key lay leaders in his church, how this could be really revolutionary for them, couldn't it?
Yep, for sure. It sure is.
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I see you joining us again. How about this working out with those young people that you're working with? In fact, we mentioned earlier that sometimes, I don't remember if you were back on the call or not, but how with those young people that may not be as familiar with their gifts, the whole idea of the dotted diamond might be a little bit more difficult for them as they're still trying to nail down what are their gifts.
Yeah, I think for us, most of the ones that we use it with our leaders more, and so most of them have been involved at camp for 2 to 3 years already, and so a lot of them do have a pretty good idea of their gifts because of just being out here and doing that sort of thing. So we found that it hasn't been that big of a challenge at all. Most of them jump right in and it connects with them pretty good.
So if they've got enough history, enough experience in ministry of some kind, then they can grasp it.
Yeah, and again, kids that generally, want to be involved in camp, a lot of them already are volunteering in their church, or they're working in that kids ministry, right? And so we're getting ones that have that, desire already to be used. I mean, that's why they're out here, is they want to be involved in ministry, and they get that. And so it's something that we haven't found to be a challenge at all. Really, they jump right in. We have the privilege of working, I think, with some of the best young people out there. So it makes a difference, right? It's ones that have that passion and that desire to make a difference.
Yeah, remembering that GRIP's full name really was Your Leadership GRIP. And so it was talking to people about how they exercise their gifts in leadership in ministry, as we have come around to have better understanding of leadership being a shared responsibility in the team and the body. We're less and less using that word leadership as your leadership GRIP, but it was assuming that people had some kind of experience in ministry already, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Tony, I didn't get a chance to really say welcome to you to the call, but I'm glad to see you've joined us.
Yes, thank you.
And now you've had enough time to really put your blue thought to work. What other comments might you have for us?
Well, the concept of the dotted diamond has been so helpful to me. I remember when Ken and I went over it during my initial conversation with him. If we go back to the old sort of Birkman with the bars, mine were basically kind of all the same. There's an emphasis more on the blue, but the other bars were kind of out there. And I've always struggled with this sense of, it seems like I have such broad interests and curiosities, and in some ways capacities that can go in all kinds of different directions. And so when we sort of identified that sort of yellow, more planning side of it, but my interests more over in the blue, sort of the analytical, thinking through kinds of things. And then we laid the dotted diamond over that. It just made so much sense, because it pushed me up into the red, into the green, more into the blue. Interestingly enough, not more down towards the corner of the yellow. So that's the relational side of things, I think, that comes out for me. And so it actually made a lot of sense in terms of understanding where my gifts lie. And in the context where I am, I mean, I'm sort of having to step into the variety of things in any given day. And just even while we were on the call, processing some administrative stuff, having a quick chat with a guest who came in and made an inquiry. So it's all over the place. The risk is, that I operate in those areas without sort of the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. And so the power, fruit, and joy question becomes an important consideration in that. And secondly, I really have to watch in terms of my own capacity to, I don't use this in the clinical sense, burn out, but grow weary. Yeah. And so I have to be really careful there, and exercise due care on sort of the self side of things. So as you were talking about Bob earlier, I'm thinking we could spell his name Tony. It seemed to fit so well with what I've been learning in this process.
It really was not you, Tony, but yeah, but thank you for that. Oh yeah, it is elusive. This whole concept is difficult for some people to catch because, as I said, it's not as quantifiable. But when we get to talking about how can this help explain your behavior, a lot of people have been helped by it. And as we get better handles on how to coach it with an individual, there's a lot less opportunity for us to tell them this is one that requires them to really do the talking and sharing where they think it's going. One key I would emphasize, I think I mentioned this before, is when we see that whole list of the range of the fans, that can be distracting to people. We don't have a good way to just show them their fans right now. I think we're kind of working on that idea of how do we just bring up their range of fans to see where it might be moving. But once they finally catch this concept of it's a range of movement, it could go anywhere between here to there. And when they finally start catching that concept, and that all of their gifts are pulling perhaps in different directions, it's a matter of what's pulling the strongest right now and where is it pulling. And when we can help them to see that concept, then I have seen a lot of people say, wow, the light really came on with this. So I hope this has been helpful, because I see that we really are right at the top of the hour already. I hope this is, well, this will not be the last time we talk about this. We will be coming back to revisit this, to talk about ways to coach the dotted diamond to help people to make that connection. So guys, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to let you go, and we'll say, just pray that God will keep using you to help individuals and teams understand better how they can use their gifts so that we can see even more people coming to faith in Jesus. God bless you all. Bye-bye.